A recent study suggests a dramatic lengthening of Earth's days and a corresponding shift in the moon's orbit, potentially impacting the development of life from an evolutionary standpoint. Now, for this discussion, we will be speaking with Dr. DeYoung, a distinguished physicist and author with over 5 decades of experience in astronomy, physics, and mathematics. Now, since earning his PhD at Iowa State University, Dr. DeYoung has dedicated his career to exploring the intersection of science and faith. He held an emeritus science position at Grace College and served a long tenure as a president of the Creation Research Society, CRS. I'm a member. Dr. DeYoung, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, David. Glad to be here.
It is so good to have you on. Listen, I remember many years ago reading your book on the moon, and I was so impressed with some of the data. And it's sort of similar what we're discussing today, because this research is all about lunar recession. So can you kind of start with the basics and just break down exactly what it means and how all of this knowledge influences our knowledge of Earth's history?
Well, certainly, David. Of course, the moon is our nearest neighbor in space, and we're connected gravitationally to the Earth. And that connection is a strong one. And what happens as the Earth turns, it has a slight braking effect on the moon, slinging it out to a further orbit. And meanwhile, the Earth slows down slightly in its rotation. So it's almost like they're strung together with a rope. And when you affect the Earth turning, you affect the moon's position. And this has happened all through biblical history.
Well, you know, when you change one, you change the other. It affects the tides. It affects the stability of Earth's axis. The moon has all of these implications, but maybe go back a little bit in Earth's history and tell me the secular view of the impact theory and all of these ideas about the moon's formation.
Well, it is known that this tidal interaction causes these dynamic effects. Of course, the moon is soon to be about 4.5 billion years old. And it's interesting, when you track that back in time, that means that the moon was at one time closer to the Earth. And it's not linear, it's greatly nonlinear. In fact, when you do the math, the physics of it, what you end up is having the moon in direct contact right here about 1.5 billion years ago. Of course, this is impossible with secular science because they say the moon is 3 times older than that. And I think that's one of the many arguments against the whole idea of deep time. The way the moon operates, the way gravity operates, the moon just cannot exist on that multi-billion-year schedule. Not saying that the moon is 1.5 billion years old, but it certainly can't be as old as secular science says. Now, in the creation view, where we have a few thousand years, yes, the moon is recessing from the Earth. But over that length of time, thousands of years, it amounts to only a few hundred feet, which is really insignificant. It's where you get into deep time that you run into lunar problems.
And that makes perfect sense. I mean, even this study says our satellite hasn't always been where it is now. They're honest about that. Of course, it's talking about the moon colliding around 1.5 billion years ago, prediction. But of course, there are excuses for all of this. Now, the implications of this research extends way beyond the moon's movement. The study actually points to a connection with the Cambrian Explosion, when supposedly life originated. Tell me about that.
Yes, David, that news article you're talking about, it's interesting. It hit the science world for about one day, and then it goes away. It shows just how transient these models and theories are. What the article says is that about 500 million years ago, for unknown reasons, the Earth slowed down from a 24-hour spin to 26 hours. And at the same time, the moon went further out suddenly, a jump of about 5%. There's no mechanism for that, which one caused which, but it's just the thing they're looking at for this kind of data are tide fossils. Now, what you can do is look at laminated layers of sediment, and you can get an idea of what tides were in the past. The tides make the sediment move around. Later on, it turns into a hard sedimentary rock. And so there is this kind of history of tides, and this is what they're looking at. Now, that kind of data is very flexible. Just a few years ago, David, they were saying that the Earth had slowed down to 18 hours. Now they're saying, well, it's speeded up to 26 hours. So again, it shows how temporary it all is.
Yeah.
But what these scientists have said is that if that really happened, then it could have some dramatic effects. It could cause this thing they call the Cambrian Explosion. That's when many complex fossils suddenly show up in the sedimentary layers with no ancestors. Now, of course, in our biblical view, this is all related to the flood. But again, they have this explosion of life, including things like trilobites and brachiopods, very complex creatures, and there they are suddenly formed. So they're saying maybe somehow this jumping of the Earth and Moon caused an instability that caused a blossoming of life. And the article goes on and says maybe this did something to the oxygen or the pressure of the Earth or the magnetic field, and there's a lot of hand waving that goes on. The article goes on and says maybe this jumping of the Earth-Moon dynamics caused later on an extinction of life. And maybe it caused the glaciers. And on it goes, kind of trying to put all of these complicated things into a deep time structure.
Maybe this, maybe that, could be, might possibly lead to. I mean, these are all fuzzy words, of course, that you really shouldn't be using in good scientific research. Of course, there can be theories, but when the theory is only an attempt to patch up the framework of evolution, which is frankly falling apart, I think it's time we move to another theory. I mean, even the Cambrian explosion itself, we don't see proto-trilobites, do we? We don't see proto-organisms, something turning into something else. We don't see cephalopods that are slowly developing different legs and turning into... No, it's fully formed creatures that we first see within the fossil record, meaning that it's something like a special creation, not long ages of evolution.
Well, that's true. Those supposed links from the past are missing. And by the way, the tide fossils, they as well, a lot of uncertainties. Tides depend on what the ocean was like in time past. And in our biblical view, even the continents were different. And so the uncertainties really mount up.
For sure. Now, given the moon's gravitational dance with the Earth, has Earth's rotational speed varied throughout its history, both in a secular model and in a biblical model?
Well, the Earth's rotation is constantly making adjustments. Even when on the Earth here, when we do a lot of Earth moving, that can change the Earth turning somewhat, the distribution of the crust of the Earth, and that's actually measurable. But major changes, well, way back in Genesis, the beginning, we have the turning Earth, we have the day and night. So what has happened on our biblical scale is very insignificant.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, everything seems to line up with taking the Bible at face value, and there are all of these challenges from a secular point of view. But like most of the research that we analyze on this show, on Genesis Science Report, this study, it was actually published by a secular science journal. Are there any unanswered questions or omissions in the article that our viewers should be aware of?
Well, again, there's a lot of glossing over different ideas of, again, how that explosion of life could occur and what happened to that. And it just kind of shows, I think, a bit of desperation. You know, David, even on a most basic level, the moon, our nearest neighbor, through the years, there have been different ideas of how the moon got there. We've had the fission theory, capture theory, nebula, collision. I've watched these ideas. They last about a decade. These origin theories roll on by. Our nearest neighbor in the sky cannot be explained. And it makes one a person just kind of gently say, you know, maybe someone put it there. And when you go into that direction, the whole idea I like about creation research It's not chance or accidental, but there's purposes. There's reasons for the moon, even though we may not know them all.
Well, for sure. And again, you just mentioned, well, there's been the fission theory, the capture theory, the impact theory, all of these theories. And that's okay for science to have multiple theories that change over time. That's part of progress, right? But when those theories have to be changed every decade or so because all of a sudden we realize that this one doesn't hold any credence, it doesn't explain it, and yet there is a historical record of the origin of the moon that has stood the test of time, that it was actually created with a purpose. But that brings me to this idea, because sure, we've been able to research the moon. It's our nearest neighbor. We've been able to pick up geological samples. We've been able to bring those back for analysis. In many cases, they defy the secular billions and billions of years of the moon's supposed history. But from a creation point of view, from a biblical point of view, what are some of the purposes, specific purposes, that the Lord would have put the moon in the sky?
Well, of course, most obvious would be a night light, which has been very important through history and still is in many different societies, that gentle light in the evening. When it gets to the moon, you can tell direction by it. You can tell the seasons. You can tell the time. If you're familiar with moon phases, you have a lot of information there for our use. You know, we've also learned, David, in recent years that the moon is why we have our seasons. The moon stabilizes the tilt of the Earth. If we didn't have the moon, then the Earth would wobble, and we might go from winter to deeper winter. You couldn't depend on the seasons. So thank you, Lord, for that, because we do enjoy seasons. And there are even more basic ideas. The moon, of course, causes the tides, and that's the oceans of the Earth, and that's a major component of their currents. If we didn't have the moon, tides would end, the ocean would likely largely become stagnant. Now, of course, there's a lot of life in the ocean, but without the tides, without the currents, the ocean would die. And so would the life. And not just animal life like fish, there are a lot of plants in the ocean. Current estimates are that half of our oxygen comes from ocean plants.
Wow.
Let's see, no moon, no tides, no oxygen, no us. Our very breath depends on the moon faithfully orbiting the Earth.
Dr. DeYoung, this is not surprising from a biblical perspective that the Lord would put something so organized, so designed, and so perfect to sustain life because He loves us. Thank you, Dr. DeYoung, for being on the show. And listen, I would love to, I see you've got a telescope in the background. Maybe we can do a star party someday, and I'd love to have you back on the program in the future.